I'm Dutch, and let's react to the Americans. Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Johan, and I'm a typical Dutchman. And if you're planning to come over to Europe, or if you're wondering why is America so expensive in compared to Europe, then you are at the right channel, because I'm comparing the United States life and living with life and living of Europe. And for today, we're going to take a look at the video of Climate Town, the brainwashing of America's children. What? I didn't know that kids being brainwashed in America. Okay, I want to know how is this possible, and is this serious, or is it just a good teacher who, yeah, let's see. We start with a subscribe and a like, and then we want to know what is going on with this brainwashing.
Crisis averted, people. See, until recently, the classrooms and libraries of America's public schools were full to the brim with suggestive books written by special interest groups trying to brainwash our kids.
Okay.
Filth that you've let in our library.
Protect our children or get out of the way.
Using our schools for indoctrination rather than education.
And it does not belong in our schools.
Thankfully, we got rid of all of those, and America's school children can go back to reading the classics.
Okay. I know these situations, I saw a lot of them, that the public react to what's good or not good for the kids in school. Banning or just adding books to the library. I don't know if it's okay or not okay, but as a teacher, as a former teacher, I think you should expose kids to all kinds of books so that they can decide what is good or not good with the help of their parents if it is really in the wrong side. But banning books, it's not my way of doing now.
Like Petro Pete's Big Bad Dream, an actual book you can find in public schools. Let's give it a look-see. One night, Pete goes to sleep and has a horrible dream about all the fossil fuels suddenly disappearing. His comb, his toothbrush, his bike tires, gone? Oh no! But don't worry, it's got a happy ending. We get 20 pages explaining why fossil fuels are the only choice for America and why thinking we should give them up is a sin. That's the kind of books our kids should be reading. Wholesome, agenda-less stories that... Wait a minute.
Okay, what?
Oil propaganda in school? Oh my God! You're trying to tell me that this series of children's books in publicly funded schools was created by the fossil fuel industry to try to groom kids into not questioning America's use of fossil fuels?
Okay. I think that I know what this is going into, because we're talking about Climate Town, so it's a climate, and Petro Pete about oil industry and the big money that's invested with the oil. Okay, I guess what it is going to.
Interesting stuff. And as much as I wish this phenomenon was contained to the Petro Pete extended universe, the oil and gas industry has spent millions of dollars trying to influence American school children. And this is not a fucking guess. There is a massive paper trail of oil-funded lesson plans and
Oil's pipeline to America's school. Why are oil and gas companies developing lesson plans for teachers? Reading, writing, and fracking. What the oil industry teaches Oklahoma students. Hated the fossil fuel industry public school takeover.
workbooks. They produce propaganda videos and pro-fossil fuel cartoons. They take advantage of underfunded schools and under-resourced teachers by donating misleading materials to classrooms. And
Yeah, I did a video recently about it, about the underfunded school system in the United States. Okay.
And a whole gaggle of shady tactics to push their agenda on kids.
It does not belong in our school.
And of course, these efforts to influence what children hear in public schools seem to be working. A study from 2016 found that only 38% of students are taught that climate change is linked to fossil fuels. And while there are a lot of factors at play, the efforts of the fossil fuel industry are clearly one of them.
Oil, which has brought a better life to all the people in the USA.
Hi, I'm Raleigh Williams, a guy with a climate science and policy degree who once played
Climate science and policy degree. Well educated. He benefited of.
an entire season of middle school basketball as a starting point guard and never scored a single point. True story. And this is a video about the oil industry influencing America's school children. Welcome to Climate Town. Close? That go? You made it. Really?
Good intro. Okay. Let's dive into it. How big oil indoctrinates American youth.
Okay, so the fossil fuel industry has been trying to weasel its way into America's public schools for decades. In their defense, they're on the supply side of oil spills, gas leaks, union busting, you know, your classic PR problems. So they'll do anything to rehabilitate their public image. One of their oldest and best strategies is to get pro-oil and gas messages in front of children before their brains develop enough for them to start asking uncomfortable questions.
They call them automobiles.
This is
They call them automobiles.
a cartoon from 1956 created by the American Petroleum Institute called Destination Earth. A Martian explorer who can travel through space becomes very impressed with America's ability to drive cars.
The source of their nourishment was something called petroleum.
Another cartoon from 1973 produced by Amoco Oil tries to convince kids that any kind of government regulation is bad.
When the Moken stopped.
Any kind of government regulation is bad. Oh my God.
Started producing again, the environmentalists were up in arms again.
We got to talk about those taxes you're charging. But don't forget, I've got to pay our stockholders a fair return.
I've got to pay our stockholders a fair return.
In 1985,
I have to pay my stockholder a fair return. Yeah. Money.
Exxon partnered with Disney on a Mickey and Goofy cartoon praising the wonders of oil. But not foreign oil. I'm talking about that good old American stuff.
Not the foreign oil.
You know, it kind of reminds me of when cigarette companies used to make fun cartoons until... What is it that made them stop? But in the late 1980s, when the public first started hearing sweet nothings about this climate change thing, the fossil fuel industry got down to brass tacks. Now remember, companies like Exxon had already been studying climate change for years and even employed some of the most advanced climate scientists in the world. In 1977, a now infamous meeting took place between the top Exxon leadership and climate scientist Dr. James Black, where he tried to convey the severity of the problem climate change represented. Unfortunately, some budget cuts and layoffs in the early 1980s pivoted the company towards a more denial-oriented strategy. In an effort to, and I quote, reposition global warming as a theory, industry groups were prepared
As a theory, not the fact. It's a fact, but okay.
to fight tooth and nail against climate change. Well, not against climate change as much as against people learning about climate change. It actually got kind of confusing reading some of these oil and gas memos because they kept saying things like they were hoping climate change becomes a non-issue. And I was like, oh, awesome, same. Until I realized we were not same. And of course, one of the industry's ideas for making climate change a non-issue was a direct outreach campaign about the uncertainties of climate science aimed directly at members of Congress, state officials, industry leadership, and you guessed it, school teachers and students. Come on down! And remember, this is an uncertainty that they themselves did not believe. This is just them trying to feed the concept of doubt to the public and seed an anti-climate change bias in America's school kids.
Yeah, okay. So, the oil and gas industry tries, I don't know if they are successful. I guess so, because if the kids learn about oil is important, but they invest in the kids so that they do not, how can I say this? Object versus new climate rules protecting the earth, protecting the climate, and they will say, it's not that big of a deal, the climate change.
Now, the system of education in the U.S. is mostly dictated on a state-by-state basis, so the oil industry funded local groups to promote climate disinformation. If you're in Arkansas,
Climate disinformation. So on purpose.
you might get a visit from the director of Arkansas Energy Rocks, an oil industry group that also offers fossil fuel-themed video games. Come on, you remember staying up all night with your friends, drinking Mountain Dew Code Red and playing oil and natural gas in your life?
Okay.
With colon at the pump. Oh, those were the days. Or maybe you're in Ohio, where you're working on your crude oil word search from the Ohio Natural Energy Institute. Or maybe you're in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where a father found a booklet called Natural Gas, Your Invisible Friend in his 9-year-old son's backpack, paid for by their local utility, Eversource. But nobody does it quite like Oklahoma and their government organization, the Oklahoma Energy Resources Board. Now, despite being technically part of the state government, it is fully funded by voluntary contributions from
Funded through a voluntary assessment paid by producers and royalty owners of the sale of oil and natural gas in Oklahoma.
Fossil fuel companies, and since their founding in the 90s, the OERB has basically only cared about two things. Number one, delivering fossil fuel-friendly educational materials to children, and number two, stopping those children from f***ing around near oil wells. Luckily, number two is pretty easy.
Play it smart, on and off the field.
That means no stupid mistakes, no smoking, no drinking, or doing drugs.
And no hanging out around oil wells.
No drinking, no smoking, no doing drugs, and don't hang around oil wells.
Jerry, Emmett, Dennis, Bill, Coach Switzer, we've all been around oil wells.
This is a pump jack. Kind of looks like a big horse. I guess that's why some kids are trying to ride him. But if you got caught under one, you wouldn't have to worry about being paralyzed, because you'd be dead.
Done and dusted. And my God, that whole video is worth a watch. It starts out with 2 full minutes of unrelated football highlights, followed by the kind of manic editing that's usually reserved for like an early 2000s music video. And now that kids are staying away from oil well sites, it's time to convince them to use oil and gas forever. And when it comes to infiltrating schools with pro-industry propaganda for children, let's see what $50 million.
Wow. $57 million. Yeah, it sounds a lot spent today to student education, but the earnings of the oil industry is, of course, much, much, much more.
buys you. First and foremost, yeah, that's gonna buy you a nice sweaty curriculum. Oklahoma public schools are so underfunded that some districts have gone down to a 4-day school week because they couldn't afford to spring for the full 5.
With state budget crisis, many Oklahoma schools hold classes 4 days a week. This is from 2017.
Luckily, the OERB has the cash to step in and provide a curriculum called Little Bits for your K through 2nd graders. You know, your 5 to 8-year-olds. It's crammed full of important messages, like the important forms of energy are oil, natural gas, and coal, and
also known as fossil fuels. Important forms of energy. Not a word, not a single word about solar and hydro energy and wind energy.
U.S. companies are spending more dollars protecting the environment than drilling new wells. And of course, it teaches the students jump rope rhymes until they can repeat them from memory. My favorite rhyme is, we need oil, we need gas. Where are the oil products in our class?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is brainwashing. Oh man. But what do teachers about this? Because if I'm a teacher and I see this, then I will use this material. Of course I will use it, but right side by side, I'm gonna show the alternatives and say these are also good stuff and this is protecting the environment, etc., etc., making a comparison between the two, and then let the kids decide which is the better one for their own future.
And then I guess they'd like point to stuff made of plastic and say it. Fun. And let's not forget the crown jewel, Petro Pete, aka a sort of Wish.com Bob the Builder. They created Petro Pete to, among other things, normalize all the batshit insane things the oil and gas industry does. Like in the story Boomerboro, Home Clean Home. A community of animals is understandably panicked when people with bulldozers start destroying their home. But Petro Pete's dog convinces them that the humans will fix everything before they leave. One of the animals very reasonably points out that they sure haven't done that in the past, and the dog says, the humans learned their lesson and now they don't leave behind a mess when they drill for oil. They clean up after themselves. And then the other animals just agree that the oil industry is great. And that's the takeaway, kids ages 5 through 8.
I'm laughing. Oh my goodness. Tell me this isn't the truth. Will somebody tell me this is not the way it actually has been done in the schools, even if they are underfunded?
Oil companies would never hurt nature. And when you graduate past the Little Bits curriculum, the OERB has a fantastic core energy program for high school students, where you get to apply what you learned with fun assignments like make a commercial that explains why petroleum is still the best source of energy today and gives us the best chance at gaining energy independence, which is a really great assignment because we all know how powerful a good commercial can be.
Yes, oil wells. Jerry, Emmett, Dennis,
Raleigh,
Bill, Coach Switzer.
Play it smart.
Play it smart.
Do something safe, like tackle football.
Smoking, drinking, doing drugs.
Kinda looks like a big horse.
You don't go near my oil wells.
'Cause you'd be dead.
And look, I'm a guy who makes comedy videos about climate change. Naturally, a lot of people ask me, why do you do that? And does anybody want that? But it's all worth it to have found this piece of propaganda. I now present Lab Time with Leo.
Okay, kid.
Follow me! Oh, oil and gas, you're all I want this Christmas.
High tech.
High awesomeness. Get your frack on!
It is wild how high of a budget that show must have. It's got sets, location changes, an actual actor. That's not cheap. Obviously, the OERB saw how much kids loved Bill Nye the Science Guy.
It's our plastic Earth surface wave model of science.
And they wanted to have their own version that would be willing to say a bunch of deeply misleading shit about the oil and gas industry.
Deeply misleading.
America's natural gas and oil pipelines is the safest, most efficient way to move natural resources.
It turns out a few $1 million worth of oil money can do exactly that. And Lab Time with Leo is exactly what you would expect. Leo covers a surprising number of extremely oil-specific topics, from fracking to seismic exploration to fractional distillation. But some lessons just get straight to the point.
Americans currently use millions of vehicles and machines that require petroleum products to operate.
Most of them are nowhere near the ends of their normal lives, so replacing them would be expensive.
For the time being, oil and natural gas remain the most feasible and cost-effective source of energy.
And this kind of propaganda is...
Yeah, I know. America is a car-based society. You do a lot of shopping, etc. by car, because like the video I did yesterday about suburbs, the suburbs are way too large going to school with your kids, or bringing your kids to the soccer mom, or going to work. Commute, everything is done by car. But if I see this one, yeah, if that doesn't change, then this won't change either.
Is all over the place. OERB materials are present in an estimated 98% of Oklahoma school districts, and they claim to have reached
all in Oklahoma. If anyone out there can tell me if there's also in all the other states, because we've got the 50, so this is only one, but
more than 3 million students. They've even pitched their strategies to other states like Montana, Arkansas, North Dakota, Wyoming.
There's the answer. Montana, Arkansas, North Dakota, Wyoming, and Texas, I see.
Wyoming and Texas. Fucking awesome. And just to say it, we know a lot of this information because of the intrepid reporting of Gia Jenny Zhao and Joe Wirtz and their investigation into fossil fuel miseducation. We put links to their stories in the bio, so if you want a ton more information on this, I encourage you to check those out. And look, trying to get in front of kids is not unique to the oil and gas industry. Marketing to children is all over the corporate world. And it makes sense. If Mr. Peanut is teaching you about digestion, maybe you're gonna be more likely to ask your parents for peanuts as a snack. And
yeah, peanut butter. Kids don't get peanut butter, and then everyone is wondering why do they have an allergy? Because they are not. Yeah.
And I'm sure Dr. Pepper is expecting someone from this 1970s home economics class to purchase Dr. Pepper as an ingredient in whatever the fuck a teenage party is. Steve Jobs himself lobbied for a tax credit to cover the costs of donating Apple computers to schools, which led to schools buying more Apple computers to fill out computer labs, which probably contributed to a generation of loyal Apple consumers and thousands of drawers full of white cables that don't go to anything. And even though schools are governed on a state-by-state basis, the fossil fuel industry has found a slick little way of hitting multiple states at once, by changing the way climate change is written about in the physical textbooks. Like in Texas, where an oil industry group called the Texas Energy Council sends representatives and trained volunteers to school board meetings to torpedo climate science education in the state science standards. These state standards determine the type of textbooks Texas requests from the textbook companies. And
so there are special groups, volunteers or paid volunteers, no volunteers, who attack schools' curriculum if they have anything that is too negative about oil and gas and too positive about solar, wind, and hydro energy.
And since Texas just happens to be one of the biggest markets in the country, major U.S. textbook companies are heavily incentivized to write their content to appeal to Texas schools. These books also get purchased by smaller states across the country. And pretty soon, dozens of states have the same diminished climate science education because of the Texas state standards. And if you're a board member at these meetings and you're trying to keep Texas students informed of the overwhelming consensus of climate scientists, you might find that that's pretty f***ing annoying.
So we've already voted to take out greenhouse gases, as we already talked about earlier in the week. Now we want to talk about taking out ways to mitigate greenhouse gases. So let's call it...
Wait. Greenhouse, back up. I expected a short clip, but this is actually a longer clip.
Climate scientists, you might find that that's pretty f***ing annoying.
So we've already voted to take out greenhouse gases, as we already talked about earlier in the week. Now we want to talk about taking out ways to mitigate greenhouse gases. So let's call it what it is. It's not about what our science teachers are suggesting or what the science industry is suggesting. At this point, we're only making votes based on what oil and gas wants us to do.
Yeah, okay. Don't talk in science class about the greenhouse effect, and don't talk in science class about how to mitigate the greenhouse effect.
Our permanent school fund is generally funded by oil and gas. And all of us are probably going to get home using oil and gas.
But no episode about intentionally misleading kids would be complete without the Heartland Institute, aka the Michael Jordan of batshit insane science denial. You may remember them from their work vehemently denying the link between cigarettes and cancer for big tobacco. But they've also built a diversified portfolio that includes climate denial. In 2012, the budget for the Heartland Institute was leaked, which includes a sizable line item for a new education project they were working on, and
$75,000,
which includes a sizable line item for a
K-12 climate education project, payments to David Warner global warming lessons, warming lesson plan modules, plus a website featuring the same estimated quarterly payments, $25,000 in June, September, and December. Annual cost. Surface stations project payments to It Works, IntelliWeather to create website featuring data for NOAA's with new network of surface stations.
A new education project they were working on, and a few years later, they unleashed why scientists disagree about global warming. It's basically greatest hits of old school climate denial talking points.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me.
I actually did a whole deep dive episode on why the sun cycle argument is such bullshit on our podcast, which you can listen to after you finish watching this video if you fucking feel like it. Now,
a lot of beeping.
Now, smarter people than me have taken a bat to all the arguments in this book, but I do want to give you one example just so you know the kind of caliber that we're dealing with here. This is the NASA global temperature curve for this nice little Earth of ours going back to the start of modern temperature records. You probably don't need me to tell you this, but the temperature line is going up. But like any good set of data, it's vulnerable. It's weak. Why accept the obvious conclusions when you can make it do whatever you want with a little bit of bullshit? If we take this graph and then select this specific high point and then chop out everything around it, and hey, that's not as much warming as everyone is complaining about. And if even that's too much, well then you can just hunt around for a different data set that maximizes that high point, and whammo, you got yourself a flat line, baby. Now this book was published in 2016, so if you backtrack, I don't know, precisely 18 years to include the very hot El Nino year of 1998, then you can make a claim like this.
There has been no global warming for some 18 years.
And if you're really lucky, you might even be able to find someone who's not that concerned about the truth, who's willing to present your findings in front of Congress. But who am I kidding? Where are you going to find someone with so little self-respect?
There has been no significant global warming for the past 18 years.
Okay. But who's buying into it?
Yeah, it really is that fucking simple. And that's just one of many, many repeatedly disproven arguments in this quite boring book. But what it lacks in excitement or accuracy, it makes up for in volume. Heartland claims to have sent 350,000 copies of Why Scientists Disagree About Global Warming to science teachers around the country. According to them, every single science teacher in America received a copy of this book. And that really seemed like a big story. It was reported on extensively in the news at the time, and
Science teachers respond to climate materials sent by Heartland Institute. For years, fossil fuel groups have tried to influence teachers in the classroom. The latest effort is a climate change teaching guide from the Heartland Institute. The Heartland Institute sends 300,000 teachers books and DVDs rejecting evidence of man-made climate change. It's not science, but it's dressed up to look like science. Oh boy.
it was also one of the reasons we wanted to cover this topic in the first place. We thought that this book that we got on eBay for $3 meaningfully promoted climate denial in American public schools? Oh no! But as we researched more, a different version of the story began to appear. You see, while groups like the Heartland Institute were once the darlings of big oil and big tobacco, which led to significant support for years, in the more recent era, their brand of blunt force climate denial seems to have gotten too extreme even for big oil. So when I said the Michael Jordan of batshit science denial, I was including the years he played for the Washington Wizards as a 40-year-old man. Oil companies obviously appreciate what the Heartland Institute is doing, but it's no longer socially tenable for big companies to be associated with such obvious bullshit. As for the teachers who actually received the books, well, there's no formal study, but it kind of seems like they saw through the bullshit too.
Yeah, I was hoping for that the teachers see that we're not gonna do this. Nice book, yeah. Anyone need to light a fire? We have a barbecue upcoming.
Very little evidence of them actually using these in any classroom. So if you're drinking something right now and you don't care about your floor, go ahead and pour a little out for the Heartland Institute. We hardly knew ye. The influence of special interest groups on American public schools is gonna take years to undo, and some states are gonna do it faster than others. In 2020, working with the Texas Freedom Network Education Fund, the Natural Center for Science Education, whose Deputy Director Glenn Branch helped us out with this episode, assigned grades to each state's science standards based on the quality of their treatment of climate change. And 27 states received a B+ or better, including states with significant fossil fuel industries, which is, you know, really nice to hear. Of course, there are a bunch of states with a...
Yeah, it's... It takes years, decades to undo this, what has been done by the oil industry in those years. And nowadays, if I guess so.
D or worse, including Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio, and Texas. But there's actually reason to be hopeful. Since those grades were published, Indiana adopted new state science standards, including more climate change content, which moved them from a D to among the top 10 states in the country. Pennsylvania stopped being such an F by simply replacing state standards that hadn't been updated in 2 decades. And I can't believe I need to say this, but science education should come from scientists and educators, and not the oil and gas industry.
I agree. I totally agree. Educators know how to educate, and the scientists know the science behind it. So combine those two and leave out any, let's say, commercial aspect of it.
Remember, those guys love money. They talk about it all the time.
Billions of dollars investing our dollars.
$18.7 billion.
For every dollar that we spend, $1 billion in free cash flow. Got to generate a profit here.
I've got to pay our stockholders a fair return.
Yeah.
If they're spending millions of dollars trying to get pro-fossil fuel information in front of children, it's probably because they think it's a good investment in delaying the transition away from oil and gas. Because if they didn't think it was going to help them make more money, why would they possibly want to make this?
Oil and natural gas can be used to make thousands of things we use in our homes, schools, and businesses daily, but only once refined.
You're killing me. Seriously, you are killing me. Which brings us to the what we're gonna do about it section, where we are right now. Feels pretty good, huh? Well, we can start off by giving science teachers the tools they need to actually teach. The National Center for...
Yeah, and as I saw in another video, money is a problem for the schools, so I don't know if it's 1 + 1. More money means better teachers, means better education. Win-win situation, I call it 1-1-1.
Science Education and Penn State published a survey of middle and high school teachers and discovered that less than half of them had taken so much as a single lecture about climate change. How can we expect our
if they didn't get paid enough
science educators to teach a subject that they themselves never had the opportunity to learn? Luckily, a handful of states, including Washington, California, Maine, and New Jersey, have recently passed legislation allocating funding specifically to help their public school teachers get up to speed on climate change. States can also help out teachers without having to go through the legislature by improving climate change education requirements in the state science standards. This can be as easy as adopting the Next Generation Science Standards, a series of science education improvements developed by 26 states, a handful of science education groups, and at least one elite-level web developer with the kind of black hat hacking chops you need to make a drop-down menu for a drop-down menu.
I can do that.
And if you personally want to get out of my dreams and into the car of doing something right now, our friends at Climate Change Makers have put together a playbook to help you contact your state and local school board representatives and politely request fair treatment for climate change in your local school's curriculum. Because, to quote a modern-day Abraham Lincoln, oil and gas propaganda absolutely
does not belong in our schools.
And just to remind you that change really can happen, remember that utility company from Massachusetts? Come on, you remember the one that made all those booklets that were titled Natural Gas, Your Invisible Friend? Well, they've recently seen some of the light and they've dropped out of the gas lobby to focus more on their path to decarbonization. They're still a massive gas utility, but it seems like public pressure can actually lead to some improvements. And in a world where public pressure is mostly being used to ban books and fire teachers, it would be
350 plus books banned in Florida school districts. I hope they were about oil and gas. Georgia teacher fired after reading book on gender to 5th grade class. Georgia teacher fired after reading book on gender to 5th grade class. 2023. Fired after reading book on after reading, I guess, out loud, reading to the class about gender. Different kinds of gender?
Really nice to see it used for something that actually improves the lives of children. Wow, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I also really appreciate family.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Wow. The brainwashing of America's children. Not the video that I expected, but it's clear about where it's coming from. Yeah, this is not good. This is not good. If I'm comparing it to the Netherlands or to Europe, I will not say that this does not happen in Europe, but the government, in conjunction with the educators, teachers, and education sector in Europe, determines the curriculum, and not some outside party from I don't know what, who injected millions and millions of euros in this case to promote a certain kind of book or lesson or something that make them richer in the future. I hope you liked this video. If you did, then press like. If you want to see more of my videos, then this is a good starting point. And otherwise, you could give me a great joy of pressing on this button, because it would mean the world to me to make more subscribers for the next couple of weeks. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.